Cliff Richard is often portrayed as more than a musician, standing instead as a symbol of steadiness in an industry known for volatility. His career suggests a man who moved through fame with restraint rather than excess, maintaining a carefully guarded sense of self while the world around him shifted rapidly. From early success to long-standing public recognition, his image has remained unusually consistent. Yet beneath that consistency lies a life shaped by pressure, expectation, and personal sacrifice. The idea of him as a moral compass reflects not only his public persona, but also the perception that he resisted many of the excesses associated with pop stardom. His journey is not simply one of fame, but of endurance, where discipline, faith, and self-control became defining forces. Understanding his life requires looking beyond the applause to the quieter emotional cost of maintaining such an unbroken public image. Early years between two worlds and the weight of displacement. Born in 1940 in British India as Harry Roger Webb, Cliff Richard entered a world already marked by instability. His early childhood unfolded against the backdrop of colonial India during wartime, where structure and uncertainty coexisted uneasily. After Indian independence, his family relocated to England, a transition that brought emotional and cultural displacement. The move was not merely geographical but deeply psychological, as they left behind familiarity for a post-war Britain struggling with austerity. The cold climate, economic hardship, and cramped living conditions contrasted sharply with their earlier environment. For a young boy, this shift meant adapting quickly to a world where comfort was limited and resilience became necessary. These formative experiences shaped his outlook, instilling a sense of discipline and emotional restraint. The sense of being between identities, neither fully rooted in India nor fully settled in England, would subtly influence his later need for stability and control. Hardship, family strain, and the formation of emotional resilience. Life in post-war Britain was defined by scarcity, and Cliff Richard's family was no exception. Economic pressure weighed heavily on the household, with his father struggling to maintain stability and his mother carrying the emotional burden of uncertainty. Their living conditions reflected the broader struggles of the time, where rationing, cold interiors, and financial insecurity were everyday realities. In such an environment, emotional expression was often subdued in favor of survival. For a young Cliff, this meant learning early that endurance mattered more than comfort. He observed silence as a coping mechanism and developed an internal world shaped by restraint rather than openness. These experiences did not break him, but instead formed a foundation of controlled determination. The discipline he would later display on stage can be traced back to this period, where hardship taught him that consistency and emotional control were necessary tools for navigating an unpredictable world. The arrival of music as escape and identity formation. Music entered Cliff Richard's life not as ambition, but as relief from constraint. In a post-war Britain still marked by austerity, the emergence of American rock and roll offered a sense of energy and possibility. Artists like Elvis Presley, Buddy Holly, and Little Richard introduced a form of expression that contrasted sharply with the emotional restraint of his surroundings. For Cliff, this music represented freedom rather than entertainment alone. It offered a way to imagine a life beyond limitation, where voice and movement could create identity. He began singing in informal settings, using whatever opportunities were available to explore this growing passion. Music became a private form of liberation, a space where he could temporarily step outside the pressures of his environment. What began as admiration gradually evolved into direction, guiding him toward a path that would eventually redefine his entire life. From amateur performer to breakthrough and public recognition, Cliff Richard's transition from amateur performer to professional musician came through persistence and timing. Forming a small group initially known as the Drifters, he began performing in modest venues where exposure was limited, but experience was valuable. A pivotal moment arrived when a recording of Move It reached industry attention, leading to its release and unexpected success. The song's raw energy distinguished it from more conventional British pop of the time, marking a shift in the national music landscape. Its chart success transformed him almost overnight from an unknown performer into a recognizable figure. This breakthrough was not simply commercial. It signaled the arrival of British rock and roll as a cultural force. For Cliff, however, this change brought both opportunity and pressure, as rapid fame demanded emotional adjustment to a level of visibility that few young performers were prepared to manage. Rise to fame, cultural impact, and the weight of expectation, the late 1950s and early 1960s saw Cliff Richard become one of Britain's most prominent music figures. His early success quickly expanded into widespread cultural influence, with hit songs and public appearances making him a household name. The media often framed him as a clean-cut alternative to more rebellious musical trends, reinforcing an image of discipline and respectability. As Cliff fever spread, audiences connected with his accessible style and consistent public persona. Yet this visibility also created expectation, as he became not just an entertainer, but a symbol of controlled success. While contemporaries explored increasingly experimental paths, Cliff maintained a more measured approach. His ability to remain relevant during rapidly changing musical eras demonstrated adaptability, but it also required careful navigation of public identity. Fame, in this period, became both a platform and a constraint, shaping how he was perceived and how he presented himself. Faith, personal transformation, and industry tension as his career progressed, Cliff Richard underwent a significant personal transformation through his embrace of Christianity. This shift was not purely private. It influenced how he approached his career and public image. During a time when the entertainment industry was becoming increasingly associated with rebellion and excess, his decision to speak openly about faith introduced tension between personal conviction and professional expectation. Some fans and industry figures reacted with uncertainty, and certain career opportunities were affected. However, this period also marked a deepening of his internal stability. Rather than retreating from music, he integrated his beliefs into his life choices, emphasizing discipline and reflection. This transformation did not simplify his journey but added complexity as he navigated the balance between artistic identity and spiritual grounding. It reinforced a sense of purpose that would continue to influence his decisions in the decades ahead. Career decline, reinvention, and the challenge of relevance by the mid-1970s, Cliff Richard experienced a noticeable decline in chart dominance as musical trends shifted. New genres and emerging artists changed the cultural landscape, and his presence in mainstream charts became less consistent. This period marked a psychological challenge, as sustained visibility had been a defining part of his identity. However, rather than withdrawing, he chose reinvention. Songs like Devil Woman signaled a shift in tone and style, reintroducing him to international audiences, particularly in the United States. This resurgence demonstrated his ability to adapt without abandoning his core identity. Reinvention was not abrupt but gradual, reflecting an artist responding to change rather than resisting it. The experience of decline and return reinforced a central theme in his life. Relevance in the entertainment industry is not permanent, and endurance depends on the ability to evolve while maintaining continuity of self. Renewed success, cultural longevity, and enduring presence. The 1980s and beyond marked a period of renewed stability and success for Cliff Richard. Albums such as Always Guaranteed achieved significant commercial performance, reaffirming his place in the music industry. Unlike earlier peaks of fame, this era reflected maturity rather than sudden breakthrough. His audience had broadened to include multiple generations, many of whom had grown up with his music. Large-scale performances and televised appearances demonstrated that his appeal had not diminished but evolved. His continued presence in the charts showed that longevity in music is possible when adaptability is combined with consistency. Rather than chasing trends aggressively, he maintained a recognizable identity while adjusting subtly to contemporary sounds. This approach allowed him to remain relevant without redefining himself entirely, reinforcing the idea that endurance in entertainment often depends on balance rather than reinvention alone. Private life, emotional sacrifice, and unfulfilled relationships despite public success. Cliff Richard's personal life has often been marked by solitude and emotional restraint. He never married and has spoken indirectly about relationships that did not develop into long-term commitments. His dedication to career and public life often took precedence over personal attachment, leading to moments of reflection and acknowledged regret. Relationships with figures such as Sue Barker and others were meaningful, but ultimately did not lead to lasting partnership. This aspect of his life highlights the emotional cost of sustained public commitment. While his career flourished, personal continuity remained limited. Rather than framing this as failure, it reflects a life structured around different priorities. Emotional sacrifices became part of his broader narrative, illustrating that success in one domain can coincide with absence in another, particularly when time, attention, and identity are heavily invested in public responsibility. Wealth, lifestyle, philanthropy, and intentional simplicity. Cliff Richard's financial success has been substantial, built through decades of record sales, touring, and royalties. Despite this, his lifestyle has often been described as restrained rather than extravagant. His property holdings include residences in locations such as the Caribbean and Europe, yet his approach to wealth emphasizes privacy and simplicity. He has also been involved in long-term charitable efforts, supporting causes related to health, children, and elder care. This philanthropic dimension reflects a broader philosophy of using success to contribute rather than display. His financial choices suggest a preference for stability over excess, aligning with his long-standing values of discipline and control. Rather than expanding public visibility through wealth, he has tended to reduce exposure, prioritizing personal peace and security. This approach reinforces the idea that his definition of success extends beyond accumulation toward responsibility and measured living. Later years, continued performance, and ongoing artistic identity in later life. Cliff Richard has continued performing and recording, demonstrating that age has not ended his creative involvement. Tours and orchestral projects have shown that his voice and presence still resonate with audiences. Rather than attempting to replicate youth-driven energy, his later work reflects maturity and experience. Performances are often framed as reflections rather than reinventions, offering audiences a sense of continuity across decades. His continued engagement with music suggests that artistic identity remains central to his life, even as other aspects have shifted toward privacy and reflection. Physical aging has introduced limitations, but not withdrawal. Instead, it has encouraged a more measured approach to performance and public appearance. This phase of his life emphasizes endurance as an ongoing process, where participation in music continues to serve as both expression and connection. Conclusion on endurance, identity, and the meaning of a public life. Cliff Richard's life cannot be defined solely by fame or commercial success. It represents a long negotiation between public expectation and private restraint, between opportunity and sacrifice. His career demonstrates how longevity in entertainment requires not only talent, but also discipline, adaptability, and emotional control. While his achievements are measurable in records and performances, his deeper legacy lies in consistency across changing cultural landscapes. At the same time, his personal life reflects the quieter cost of sustained visibility, where certain forms of intimacy and personal continuity were limited by choice and circumstance. Ultimately, his story illustrates that endurance in the public eye is not passive but continuously constructed. It is shaped by decisions made over time, often away from attention, and sustained through a commitment to identity that resists fragmentation even under constant pressure.